did a degree, a bachelor's degree, when I was younger in Messianic Studies in Florida. That's where I grew up. So, but it's something that I love to study. And every year, I was telling these folks, every year I find there's a new revelation that pops up. Same story, I may have read the same passage 1,600 times. All of a sudden, boom, something pops up. It's usually related to a Jewish meaning. It's like, that's why Jesus did that, because he had to, because that's what you do in Judaism. But anyway, I want to start with this. We'll talk a lot about the Passover. Who's been to a Passover, a Jewish Passover? Or a Messianic, yeah, Christian.
The Christian one, but they were redoing.
They were doing the Jewish way of doing it. So, does anybody know what this is? Leonardo da Vinci. You know, painting. It's very famous, probably the most famous painting in the world. And it is completely wrong. It's racist. It's anti-Semitic. It's not historically correct. And it's just, I'll show you how awful it is. I'll point some things out. He probably did that. He was a real, he was a genius. So he probably knew what his buyer wanted. Whoever paid and commissioned him for the painting, they said, I want this to be this way. It has to show a Christian thing. They were Catholic, so they don't have lamb on the table, which is the only thing served at Passover is lamb. Not now, because the temple's been destroyed in 70 AD, so Jews don't eat lamb anymore. They have fish, they have chicken, but they don't use lamb until the temple gets built, the third temple. When it gets built, then they'll start eating lamb again at Passover. But at the time of Jesus, he would have had lamb, because he had not been sacrificed yet, and the temple was still standing. So they have fish because they're Catholic, and on Friday, Catholics eat fish. Now, you guys are a little younger than I am, but when I grew up, no matter where I lived, Indiana, Florida, the school always had fish on Friday. And that was from the Catholic community. That's where we got fried fish on. That came out because of one of the popes said, you know, we can't eat any meat on Friday because it's like, you know, we're grieving Jesus, you know, going to the cross. So we can't eat meat. We're fasting for meat. And the one said, yeah, I really love my fish though. So I'm going to declare fish is not a meat. Now we can have fish. Can't have chicken or anything else. That's how it came about. So he made a decree. The seating is completely wrong. Jesus would have never been in this kind of a setting right here. The Last Supper is what it's called, but it was Passover. It was the last Passover with his disciples before he was sacrificed. And it was one of the most important things in Christianity, that what Jesus did, how he changed the Passover. There is, everyone in here has a long nose. If you see them in profile, they have like a long ski nose. This is a Roman nose. You know, they're kind of light. In those days, Romans were lighter. They have a ski slope nose that goes straight down. Jewish noses typically are kind of hooked. And there's one guy in here who's Jewish. Can you tell who it is? He's also dark. He's got Mediterranean kinky hair. It is Judas. Judas. And he's actually painted in a profile. And this is what Hitler used. Anytime he was trying to downgrade Jews, he'd always have this cartoonist have a Jewish guy, big fat in a tuxedo, because they were all rich, you know, bankers, in a tuxedo. And they always had to be sideways so you could see their crooked nose. You knew they were Jewish. So it's a very racist profile. He's dark skinned, he's got kinky hair, and of course he's holding the money bag. He's also turned over the salt, which is bad luck. And so he's the only one in here that's really dark skinned. So a lot of things. The main thing is, look at the bread. The bread is yeasty rolls. And if anybody knows anything about Passover, there's only one kind of bread you can have at Passover, and it's a matzah. And this matzah actually is not, this is just regular matzah for the year. And it'll tell you on the box, that means kosher, right there, the little symbol. So it means it's kosher, but it can't be eaten for Passover. When Passover gets closer, April the 26th, I think, starts it this year. When Passover comes, the Jewish ovens, they do one or two things. They either use completely different ovens to bake this bread, or they shut off the ovens and they completely clean it out, because you can't have any kind of yeast during Passover. It's 8 days of no yeast. And this is yeastless bread. That's why they eat it. And they remember the time that the Jews came out of Egypt, wandered through the desert, and they had to leave in such a hurry that all they could do with their dough is pack it down. They put it on something, and then the sun from the desert, you know, baked into a flatbread. But they didn't have time to put yeast in it and make it rise, and then put it in an oven. They had to do it on the run. So Jews all over the world, on our 20 26th. I think it's the 16th of Nisan is the name of their month. Their Jewish months go by the moon. They're lunar months, so they always fall at the same time. Passover always falls on the exact same time of the year. Easter floats all over the place. Christmas floats all over because we're not on a creational calendar. Our calendar goes from, it's Gregorian. Who was it, Greg the Great or something? You know, said I want this calendar because it's more accurate than the other calendar. So we're in the Gregorian calendar. Or something that's very not Jewish or un-Jewish is our days are named after gods, like Sunday and Saturday, Saturn. And so Jews typically will say the first day of the week, the second day. You see that in the Bible, in the Gospel? What day of the week? It was on the seventh day. You know, on the seventh day we rest. Then the first day is Sunday, and we start a new week again. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days in Judaism. They don't want to use those types of things. So we have yeasty bread. So everything there is wrong. The way they sit is not right. And this is one that I got off the internet, and this is very, very Jewish. Mm-hmm. In that day, the Roman, I think it came from Rome actually, but this is called a triclinium table. You see the three parts of it? When I do a meal, we'll get these types of tables like this. We'll make one stretch here. There's one stretch there, one stretch down there. Now, this was if you know anything about history and archaeology, this is what you'll find in all the homes, especially for important meals like the Passover, probably the most important of the year. The triclinium table is built so this is Jesus here, and this is the head of the table. This is the middle, and then that's the end of the table. Now, the most important person is going to sit right here where Jesus is. The person who owns the home or is the who's hosting, you know, the big guy here. It might be a rabbi, could be a king, anybody who's the highest rank would sit here and run the Passover. There's certain steps you do, and they would run the Passover. This is John, and he's there to protect Jesus. If someone tried to come in to assassinate this guy, would take the bullet, or well, not bullet, but would take the knife for him. So this was not the most important, but he was real important. You have this guy here. This is Jesus, the most important seat. This is the next most important, and then this is the one on the left is then a little less important. And then as you go down, you get less and less and less and less until you get down to the servant seat. And this is where no one wants to sit, in the servant seat. If you remember, Jesus said there was some argument going on. I want to be on your left, and my son's going to be on your right, and my other son's going to be on your left in heaven, because that was a very important place to be. They were talking about the Passover seat arrangement. And we're going to have an eternal Passover when all's said and done. You know, Jesus is going to be leading, and we're going to be eating at his table. So the assignment is important. You also hear Jesus saying, when you come into a festival or a meal, don't go to the head of the table, because if someone more important comes in, it's, hey, Royce, down to the end of the table. The governor just came in. You know, it's like, oh, now you're humiliated, you know, publicly. Oh, and they said, go to the end of the table, and then you can be magnified in public, because it's like, hey, what are you doing down there? You're much more important. Get up here, you know, take this guy's place. And so then you'd be real proud you get to come to the more head of the table. There's something else that if you recall the gospel about that night, this again was typically Passover. They have matzah, they have lamb, and they have wine. Those are three things you have to have, or it's not a Passover. They've been doing that for 1,500 years up to this point. Jesus did this every Passover of his life. He was doing this, so this was his 33rd Passover. And on this day, and they know it's the right day, because after they do that, and after we do our Passovers, we all go outside, and this monster moon comes up over the horizon, just about when we're ending. I think it's about 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And everybody looks at it and goes, yep, we got the right day. And that's the full moon saying, you know, everyone in the world, every Jew in the world is doing Passover exactly on the same day, in the same evening. So when everyone was coming to the table that night, someone was missing. Judas wasn't there. Everyone was there like, where's Judas? We're trying to get this thing started. Where's Judas? Well, I don't know. Judas is doing something else. We know what he was doing. But they didn't. Jesus did, but the rest of the disciples were like, well, who cares? It's just Judas. So the reason that Peter, we have John, we have Peter. The reason John and Peter are right next to Jesus is because, if you remember, Jesus told them the day before, go down into the village and prepare this meal and the seating arrangement. So they said, hey, we're going to write our seating arrangement. Guess where I'm going to be? I'm going to be here, and you're going to be on the left side of Jesus. It's the most important places to be. So that's why they're seated here. Now, funny thing in this picture, this is actually Peter here. How did he get down to the servants' side, down the servant's seat? Because in this arrangement, this person would have to wash everybody's feet because they're the servant. It's a servant's seat. Here's the basin. There's the towels. If you notice, you can wash feet without ever interrupting conversation. And this is a neat seating arrangement because the servers, if it was a fancy festival like a pilot or Claudius or somebody that's really important, they would have servant people come in and just keep changing out the food and the wine. And they would never have to interfere with the conversation. The way we do it now, it's like you're having a nice romantic dinner and the waiter goes, oh, scoot down there and pour you a glass. And you go, have it on. And they're always bugging you. And this way, they were almost not even seen, and everybody can talk. So what happened, Peter was here, because that's where his nameplate. John was there, because they had the decision of doing that. When everybody came in, Judas came in late, and of course he had to go sit down here where Peter is right now. So he had to sit there. Everyone's thinking, man, this is justice. This is going to be a great night. Judas is late, and he's going to have to wash our feet. He's a scoundrel anyway. We don't really like him. Plus, he holds the treasure. He's holding all the money. And we know he's stealing from it, So they thought that was just great. But as the meal got going, Jesus leaned over, Peter was here, leaned over to Peter and said, Peter, I'm going to teach you something tonight. Go take the place of Judas and have him come up here. And you can just imagine Peter saying, are you kidding me? I'm your rock. I'm the guy that protects you. I'm your bodyguard. I believe in you more than these other people here. You can't sit down on the surface seat. What are you doing? He says, trust him. So I think he was probably grumbling, kicking the floor. Judas, get up there. Now Judas did not want to be up here next to Jesus because he had just done something. He had just betrayed Jesus. He did not want to be anywhere near Jesus. He was very happy to be down there. He said, why, what's going on? Jesus wants you up there next to him. He said, well, no, you can go back. He goes, no. Our rabbi has said something, we got to obey him. So Judas goes up there, and now here's Judas back here. He is not really wanting to get near Jesus. And in a typical Passover, in those days, they were on the ground on pillows, and the left hand was for the business, so you wouldn't use that on the table. You'd almost always use your right hand to almost do everything. If you had to do something, but you would eat and dip into the sauce with your right hand only. And everybody was laying on their left elbow. So everybody was kind of slanted. You can see John's doing it right here. But they would almost all be slanted. You literally would be almost, if you were closer together and you were both leaning, you would be almost on his chest. So Jesus literally was on his chest. And Judas is like doing this, like he's burning inside. And he wanted to get out as fast as he could. And of course we knew he did, eventually. So he left early in the story. Something else that goes on in here, Jesus, Peter says, okay, I'm going to have to start washing feet here so I can get myself clean, I can start this meal. And so when Peter started to get up to wash the basin, Jesus said, go sit back down. I'm going to do this. And that, again, was another shocker. He said, what are you doing, Rabbi? You can't wash our feet. That's like a king washing a servant's feet. It's not done. And remember, Peter, anyway, he went back to his seat, and Jesus unrobed. They just have a little towel that goes down here. And then Jesus was on his hands and knees washing everybody's feet. And you have to start here, because that's the clean water. By the time you get down to the end, it's muddy, because they had to walk there on streets, and streets had dung and other things on it. So by the time you got to the last guy here, it was a pretty dirty water pail. Another reason not to sit in that seat. But he came to Peter, and Peter said, I will not allow this. I am your servant, you're not mine. And he says, you don't understand, the greatest is the least. And he says, I am your servant. I am a servant king, a servant Lord. And he says, then he said, just throw the whole thing over me. I'll take an entire bath. And Jesus said something very interesting. He said, you've already had a bath. We've all had baths. Because you can't come to a Passover without taking a mikvah. Does anybody know what a mikvah is? Mikvah is a baptismal pool. It's like a bathtub. So I have a hot tub on my back deck, and every time I go into it, I think I'm in a mikvah. Every Jew even to this day, takes a mikvah for different reasons. A mikvah is an immersing bath. I've been to Israel once, and I go in a couple weeks again, and all the archaeological digs around Jerusalem, Jericho, it doesn't matter where you go, you find mikvahs everywhere. And if you were fairly well-to-do, you had one in your house. You would catch, it rains in Israel, in that area, Judean desert, about once, maybe twice a year. All the rain comes at one time. So they have all these funnels coming off the roof that funnels down into a cistern, and then they go and they can dip water out of that. And all the mikvahs had that. So in Judaism, and it was a word of God, God established it in the Old Testament, you have to take a mikvah for certain things, for almost everything. Passover, Feast of Lights, which is Hanukkah. I take that back. I don't think you have to do it for Hanukkah because that's not a major feast. But the Tabernacles, which is in the fall, Shavuot, which is the waving feast, which we call Pentecost. That's actually a Jewish festival, really giving thanks for the very first fruits that have come out of the fields in the spring. And you have to take a mikvah before synagogue. You can't go to synagogue without taking a full immersion bath. So they were very clean. They had a lot of diseases. They had fewer diseases than the Romans, the Gentiles, much less diseases because they had Levitical law. In Leviticus, if you ever read that, I'm a physician, so I have a book at home called None of These Diseases, written by an MD. Remember it?
Yeah, my mom has that.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I think it was written in the 50s or 60s. It's not a new book. And what he said is, he says, I can prove God by medicine. And what he did was he took the book of Leviticus, and it showed all the cleanly laws. These are the laws when they came out of Egypt. God said, I'm going to teach you some things so you won't get those diseases anymore. Because the Egyptians, when you got a cut, they would take donkey dung and rub it in there. And all this pus would form. They thought that was a healing process. Kind of is, but you can imagine how many things they had to amputate. So God was going to have to do that. He's going to teach them a new thing. So Moses comes down with this Levitical law that you know what you have to do now when someone gets sick, he has to be isolated away from everybody else. And then if he passes away, everything is unclean. First of all, there's a way to wrap that person. You salt them down, you wrap them up, you take them, you have to bury them, for so many, there's a whole process, I won't get into that. But then it says for 7 days that bed is unclean, and anything under the bed is unclean for 7 days. And what that means is, I've been into several surgeries. I send people for back surgery, and if I can go, I'll go with them. And when I go to scrub in, I have to, you have to wash your hand, and then the nurse will put on this thing, and you have to keep your hands above your waist. So you've seen that on TV. Here comes a doctor, scalpel, and then when you're working. So I've been in some surgeries when they're laying tools and doing things, laying tools, and a tool drops, and the doctor just kicks it over across the room because it's dirty. Can't pick it back up. And there was one time where I was in there early on, and something started to slide, and I went to catch it. He says, "Don't touch that." And I come back up. He goes, "Re-scrub," because my hand went below my waist because bacteria has weight and it drops to the ground. Obviously, the ground's much dirtier than up here. So interesting. The Bible knew that. So either an alien came and told Moses that, or there's a real God. That is a great book. It's a really good book. Get back to this. He said, Peter, I'm not going to dump this over your head because you're already clean. You took a mikvah. He goes, yeah, we all did. And Jesus said, one person didn't. And I know because I was sitting right next to him. I could smell him. It was Judas. And if you go back and read that, I don't know if it's Matthew, Mark, or Luke, which one that is in. They're all three, tell different parts of the story. But Jesus said he did not take a mikvah because he was too busy, getting, plotting, getting his reward and turning in Jesus. So they knew that. Jesus could smell him. It's fascinating when you think about it. Again, this is part of that Judaism. If you know a little bit about Judaism, revelations pop up. You start reading stories that we've read since kids. It's like, this makes complete sense. Interesting thing, if I have a Jewish person I know of that has become Messianic, that means that they accept Jesus as their Messiah. Now, they don't change anything else. They don't go to church. They don't do Christmas. Don't do Easter because those aren't in the Bible. They're not in our Bible. They're not in their Bible. But they go to synagogue. They still praise God. They still do all the feasts. They do Passover. Nothing changes except now they believe in Jesus as their Messiah. And that's perfectly fine. I think it's one of the 13 or 16 duties in Judaism is to long for the Messiah. And I know if I talk to a Jewish person, it's like, when Messiah comes, you're going to say, I told you he was coming, there he is. And I'll say, I told you he was coming back, there he is. And then we'll completely be the same, we'll be worshiping the same God, because it'll be Yeshua, Jesus. And they'll accept him, because he's a Jew, and we'll accept him because he's our Lord. So we'll actually blend together again. Right now, Jew and Gentile are pretty separated. So anyway, I just thought that was fascinating. You know, then you look back at this thing, there's just nothing real about it. There's nothing real at all. So the getting into the Passover, there's at every Passover, here's the plates. You can pass these around. Actually, pass this one. This is all Hebrew. Pass that around. And that's at every Passover. If you guys have been to Passover, you'll notice they have a central plate. We do like a plate for every 4 people. And you have certain things, elements on there. Of course, there's wine. If it's a Baptist organization, we're going to be using grape juice. If I do it with a Jewish person, it'll be real wine. There's kosher wine for Passover. It has like 1% alcohol. It's real sweet. You can't drink much anyway. But at Passover, every Jewish family, and our 26th or 23rd of April, every Jew in the world will get together at the Passover, and they will take this thing. It's called a matzah tash. And again, Jesus, let's put this back up. Jesus would have been the one doing this, but it's the rabbi in the room or it's the father of the house that does it, and he'll load this matzah tash with 3 loaves of matzah. And if you notice, there's 3 compartments in here. Okay, so he'll put one on the top, he'll put one in the middle, and he will put, and this will be done. This is done for 3,500 years. This has been done. And then that goes and lays on the table. And as they do their performance and as they go through the ceremony, they will say it's time now to create the afikomen. And that's a Greek word. They're not quite sure how a Greek word got into Passover, but every Jew will say, we're going to make the afikomen. So the rabbi in the room will take the middle piece, not the top, not the bottom. And by the way, you know there's 3 of those in one. It's 3 in 1. And you ask any rabbi, why's your 3 in 1? That means something to us. And no, it's not the Trinity, it's not the Trinity. It means the people, the kings, and the priests. Yeah, really? Well, then why do you do this to the priest in the middle? So you take the middle one, and the rabbi at the head of the table will break it, stick 1/2 piece back, and then we don't have a cloth, do we? I use this. This is actually a prayer shawl. I'll use it. And then he'll take it, he'll show it to everybody that it's been broken, and he'll wrap it in usually it's a white linen cloth, you know. They usually will break it, and then they say, okay, kids, everybody put your head down, no cheating, no peeking, and then the guy will go over and make sure the kids aren't watching them, and he'll hide it somewhere. And then he goes back, he says, okay, kids, you can look. He'll hide somewhere under a pillow or in a bookcase or something like that. At the end of the meal, when the Passover's over, there's one last thing. It's the most important part of the Passover, and it's called the afikomen, and it's when they have the kids go look for the hidden, buried afikomen, and that has to come back. It's the last thing you put in your mouth. For 12 hours, you can't put anything else in your mouth. There's one last thing of wine, but you can't eat any food after that. So they'll say, kids, go. And they'll knock things over, knock over chairs. They'll go running for it. One kid will find it. And you go, I found it. He said, well, bring it back to me. He says, let me have it. So we finish our meal. He goes, nope, can't have it. He says, how much you want for it? You have to ransom it back. This will be done in every Jewish house in the world. And if it's a very poor Jewish family, I'll give you a lump of coal or an apple. If it's a wealthy New Yorker, what do you want, Maserati? You're 16? Yeah, I want a Maserati. Okay, you can ransom it back. But it's different prices according to, sometimes if I do it, I just have a $1 bill. And when the kid finds it, I'll just give him a $1 bill or a $5 bill or something. But they bring it back to the table, and then they unveil it, and it is broken. Sometimes they'll break it after they do this, and then other times they'll do it. They'll break it as they go hide it. But now it's broken, and everyone passes it around. Everybody in the room has to have it, and they wait till everybody gets it, and then their last piece, and then they have a prayer, which Jesus, he did this. Remember him saying, everybody look at this, I'm doing something new, I'm breaking this, and this is me. Boom. I think, I'm not sure about this, but I think that up until this point, they had matzah, and they had 3 loaves of matzah, but they didn't break the middle one. I think that started with Jesus. I'm not sure about that. If you guys want to study up on it. I think he's the one that took the middle. He said, this is me. I'm the middle piece, and I'm breaking my body for you. And when you hide it, they go, yeah, we know this ritual. What's he mean? What's the body's going to be broke? That doesn't make any sense. It's not like he's going to die. And then they take it, and everybody at the last meal, they put it in their mouth and they eat it, and they savor it. If you keep bread in your mouth, and if you chew a little bit, and then you keep it there and don't swallow it, amylase in your saliva will break it down. Amylase is an enzyme for sugar. It breaks down starch and cuts the carbon bonds, and it makes sugar, so it will actually turn sweet in your mouth. And that's the last thing you're supposed to remember. And they say the Passover is finished, and then everybody leaves and goes home. And they don't relate that to Christianity at all. But can you see a lot of richness in that? And I wish all Christians would do that. At that time. But anyway, fascinating. Here's something else. Can we turn the lights out without? Is it easy to turn the lights on and off? Get my phone. You got a flashlight on your phone? Just turn it on.
She's got a real flashlight.
Oh, real flashlight would work even better, I believe. Okay, good. Actually, I probably should have here. So the matzah is interesting. Why did Jesus pick matzah to say, this is me, this represents me? Matzah is made, like I told you, they clean out the furnaces to make sure there's no possible yeast in there. During Passover, it is a Passover, yeast is considered sin. So this is made without yeast. That's why it's not puffy. That's why that's wrong down there. And it is striped because of the way it's cooked. It's on a flat metal thing, and of course they roll it with a pin. You ever seen Grandma do that? Or pour a bunch of holes, poke a bunch of holes in pie crust so it won't bubble up and blow up. So to keep this from curling up on the iron that they're cooking on, they actually have it's all done mechanically now, but there's like a pinwheel that runs back and forth. So this thing is striped, it's pure, it has no yeast, and then it's pierced. So you see that? So it's striped, pierced, and it's sinless. And you guys probably have been raised Christian, I would imagine, so you know what that means.
Yeah.
And that's why he took them broke. That's what Jews eat every Passover. The last one that they actually take out, they break, they hide, they bury, they resurrect it at the end of the meal. And that's why Passover just shouldn't be done by Christians, because they're blinded to that, and we're not. But don't get too cocky, because we are blinded to a lot that we don't see, like what we're talking about tonight. A lot of Christians, they're completely blinded to this, and it would make their Bible become so much more real when they understand these principles. So, people talk about the scales over the Jewish eyes; they can't see Messiah. We have our own anti-Semitic scales, and we don't see what's under Scripture as the Jews do. The friend I'm talking about, when we have Jews that accept Messiah, they can teach you in about a week. They can start teaching you about the Bible, because they've been raised with this. They know all this. They have to go to Hebrew school, and they start connecting these things that we're talking about tonight. They go, well, that's why we do this, and that's why Jesus did that, and that means that's his body. It's broken, and I know why now. There's another interesting thing I found out in my studies. This particular bread here, the afikomen, takes the place in modern day Judaism as the Passover sacrificial lamb to take away the sins. And I can't remember the name of it. It's something like Hagnal or something like that. But anyway, it has another name, and because if you ask a rabbi, how do we get our sins taken? There's no temple. We don't have any lambs to bring, and there's no priest. They're sacrificing them to take away our sins. Well, for now, until the third temple gets built, this is taking away your sins. We're going to consider this the lamb, the sacrificial lamb, and it has a Hebrew name. So that's pretty fascinating. But still, until they see Messiah.
Who told them to do that?
To do what? Oh, this lamb. That gets done with very, very honored rabbis through the years. There's these, if you look in Judaism, there's these famous rabbis. Jesus talked about some famous rabbis that came before him. One was like, Jesus, this famous rabbi before you said, don't do bad things to your neighbor, because you wouldn't want the neighbor. He says, I got one better. Love your neighbor before he loves you. In other words, don't think about negative. He turned it into a positive. Because up to that point, the Jewish saying was, don't do bad things to your neighbor, because you wouldn't want bad things being done to you. And he changed it around. It said, love your neighbor as yourself and do good things to him even without even asking. If they ask for your coat, give them your pants too. So this was, the rabbis kind of collectively do this. And there's two major divisions of Jews in the world. There's Sephardic and Ashkenazi. Ashkenazi is the European, and then the Sephardic are everything in the Middle East, like Africa, Middle East, Saudi Arabia. And in 70 AD, when the Romans wanted to destroy Israel for all and all the people, they killed everybody they could find. They burnt down, they burnt the temple down. It was lined with gold. In fact, it was so polished that you literally could not look at it in the middle of the day. When you came up to the temple, you had to do this. You see reflections off buildings, off glass. It was so bright you'd have to put your head down. It was just a beautiful building. But they scattered the people. They had to run for their life. They went into all the countries of the world. A few stayed there and just changed their religion. They said, "You guys are Roman? What do you guys do?" "Well, we believe in Zeus." And, "Okay, I'm in." And they just stayed there. They're now today called Palestinians. They just stayed there. And then when the Christians came, they turned Christian. Ottoman Empire, I can't remember what their religion was, but they wanted to stay there, so they just converted whatever religion was there. But the majority of Judaism spread through the entire world. So you have the reason does anybody watch Netflix? Netflix? Mossad is the secret service of Israel. And why they're talking, I don't know, because they're so secretive, they never say anything. It's like, hey, Mossad, in Tehran, the #1 nuclear scientist, a little toy motorcycle came and assassinated him, a remote-controlled motorcycle. And then the week before that, the next guy in charge died of poisoning. Did you have anything to do with it? We don't know anything about it. They always say that. We don't know. Oh, that's bad. That's bad. But they're in there all the time assassinating scientists and trying to keep their nuclear program down. But the Mossad is fascinating. Netflix. Some of these guys are really old now, but what they do, the way they can get away with things, it's remarkable. And they have connections all over the world. In Russia, there's people in high levels that are Jewish, and everywhere, you name it. Africa, Central America, Brazil, America, there's high-level Jews, and so the Mossad can connect with any place in the world. Hey, what's going on in Tehran? Tell me. Well, we had a meeting and we're deciding to start this nuclear program over here. They go, "Oh, that's what we thought." Okay, thanks for your info. But they have an incredible network, better than the FBI and the CIA. But that's because they were forced out of their home. And in our Bible, of course, it says, God says several places that in that day I will scatter my people into the wilderness, which means the world, and then I'll bring them all back together. In that last day, I'll bring them back together, and Jerusalem will be their capital. And the old buildings will be rebuilt again. Well, in 1947, there were enough Jews in Israel that they declared themselves a nation, and the UN had to okay it. And there were 3 votes that counted. America said yes, against all the advisors. I can't remember who was the president at the time. Wilson. Anyway, he pushed yes. For some reason, Russia pushed yes. It didn't make any sense. I didn't know. I think God just took a hand and said, "Wait a minute, I wanted to know how'd that happen." I don't know how they said yes. And there was another country, I can't remember who it is. They got enough votes, and that trumped out all the other countries. They became a nation again in 1947, and that's where I'll be in a couple of weeks. And now they've grown, they've blossomed. In fact, right now that they have sent their first moon lander, which is orbiting us right now, and it's getting ready to shoot off to the moon. And that's up there right now. It blasted off a couple of days ago. So they're super high tech, and they're the 8th most powerful country in the world. And they're this big compared to the world. You can walk across it sideways in a day, easy. Up and down, it's a little bit longer. It's about the size of Rhode Island. So it's a tiny. You get a map out, you can't even find Israel. You have to keep looking. There's the Mediterranean. Oh, that little dot. That's where everybody's fighting over. Of course, there's a reason for that. Let's see where we want to go next. Anybody have any questions on what we just talked about? Okay. This is sort of my vision of world history as it relates to Jews and Christians. I tried to get this off, and I couldn't, so I just thought I'd go over it again. But this is a tree. These are roots. And this is Israel. Judaism or Israel. What I have over here, the head of Abraham. And Jacob. Abraham, Jacob, as it's said in Hebrew, and Yitzhak, which is Isaac. And those are the three sort of founders that God used to make the trunk of Israel. Let's put Israel up here. We'll stop it. So that was Israel. But when we come up to where Jesus is in the timeline here, we don't know this is the beginning. Then Israel got trapped in Egypt. Were there for some 400 years or so. They were slaves. That's what Passover is all about, by the way. The way they got out of Egypt is God came and said, Moses, tell Pharaoh to let my people go. And he said, there's no way. This is my workforce, my slave force. I'm not going to let them go. Are you crazy? And so eventually God pushed the plagues on them, which is recited in every Passover. They do every plague. And they actually get their cup of wine, and they get their finger, and everybody says it together. Lice, cattle disease, locusts. And what they're doing is they're taking wine out of their cup. The wine is a blessing, and they're reducing their blessing because they still want to mourn what happened to the Egyptians. And of course, death of the firstborn was the last one. And that's what pushed Pharaoh over the top. So he said, just get out here, grab your stuff, and go. And so they went out into the desert. And the reason that the Jewish people, or most of the Jewish people, their firstborn did not die, because remember the death angel came in, and the instructions were, if you will kill a lamb, get the blood of a lamb, innocent lamb, you put it over your doorpost, on the top and on both sides, you'll be okay. And then stay awake all night, stay standing up and stay awake, get ready to run, get ready to roll, because we're going to get your traveling clothes on, don't have pajamas on. And then they took their lamb and they roasted it. They had to roast it all and eat every bit of it, not the skin, but they'd eat everything else. So the death angel came. When the death angel came and saw blood, it said, well, there's already been a sacrifice here. I don't have to go in here. I'm not going to enter. I'll pass over that house. Then the next one, well, there's blood here. There's already been a sacrifice, so I don't need to go there. And they go in, there's no blood. And they go in, firstborn is dead. There's a lot of really interesting scientific discoveries and possibilities on that. One is that there's some volcanic activity and poisonous gases actually happened in South America. A whole entire village, just dogs, cats, cattle, elderly people, they woke up and everyone was laying down there all dead because this gas bubbled up from a lake, and it was heavier than air. So as it came up, it pushed all the oxygen up and up over their heads. So this can occur. They think that there's a possibility that could occur where this gas came in, and where they were all upright eating and getting ready to go. They couldn't breathe it. Anybody laying down, and with the pharaohs and the Egyptians, the most prized place was on the ground floor, and they would lay down on the ground floor. Someone with a less rank, which would be not the firstborn, but maybe the secondborn, they had to sleep a little higher, And so that's an interesting theory. But anyway, God wants to do it. So we're getting up where Jesus is, and there's a split. There's a major split, big split, and you have Jerusalem, and leading up to Passover week when Jesus was crucified, there were millions of Jews in Jerusalem. It was a huge group of people. And everyone knew that he was Messiah because he just raised Lazarus, and that was the last thing. So they checked off their block. They know what Messiah has to do. Jesus did that, yep. And they said, well, he's done everything. This is Messiah. So much so that they gave him a Messiah's welcoming into the city. On the donkey, when he came down from the Mount of Olives, they were throwing down their prayer shawls. They were throwing the prayer shawls. Reverend Jews wear prayer shawls. They were throwing them down on the ground just so the donkey could walk over, and they would praise him. And remember, the temple guards came up and said, tell your people, stop doing this, because this is a prophetic praise for Messiah only. He said, I'm not going to do that, because if I told them to stop, the rocks would start to talk, and they would start to praise. So the whole entire congregation, and the reason you could ride right into the temple and walk among the temple that week without being touched by the Romans or the Jewish guards, which all wanted him dead, is because the people loved him so much, and he was so popular, and no one could touch him. They would mob the Romans, or they'd mob the others. The trial that took place was done in a small courtyard. It wasn't the people. You see a lot of plays where the whole of Israel's going to crucify him. That didn't happen. They were all saddened and very discouraged when he was crucified, because they thought, this is Messiah. The Romans are getting out of here. We're home free. So it was an illegal trial at night. It broke every Jewish law that has to do with the court of law. came up, it was done at night, it was done in secret, so it was completely illegal, but they still did that. So there was a big cut right here, a big wound, and you can relate that to Jesus' wound, and this was where we're grafted into. I think you know where I'm going with that. This is where we're grafted into. So what happened after Jesus? A lot of Jews, in fact all Jews, they were all Jews, his followers. Every author of the Bible was Jewish, except Luke, he was half Jewish, he was a physician. But his whole community, which we call a church, started to grow and expand and expand and expand. And then it started going off into Gentile lands like Rome and Galatia and all those other places. So this group, and again, this group is tied on to the wound of Jesus, grafted in. Now, you get up here now, Gentiles like us are getting into this new sect, this new division of Judaism. Because Christianity really is a branch of Judaism, in the best sense possible. So as they go on here, we start collecting Gentiles. So here's regular Jews. So this branch over here is Antichrist. So this group is Antichrist. You know that the typical Jew is going to say, there is no Jesus, he's not Messiah, there's no way, he's Antichrist. And then over here, you have anti-Semitism. That says anti-Semitism, you can't read it. And this is what the church eventually, the Jewish group dropped out and separated, and this turned into completely Gentile in the Roman Catholic Church. And it was, and of course, we all know the history of anti-Semitism by Christian church. So these are anti-Semites, these are anti-Christ. But look what's happening today. For the first time in 2,000 years, there are so many Messiah-believing Jews in Israel that the government is actually, it's actually a problem. It's a governmental problem because there's so many Jews coming to Jesus. It's probably more than it was back in the time of Jesus at this point. So we have a lot of things lining up. And like I said, when Jesus comes back, you will say, hey, Jewish guy, I told you he was coming back. And the Jewish guy say, I told you he's going to be here. You know, that's my Messiah, it's my Messiah. And that's what these people are here. This is the Messianic world right here. So you'll still have these anti-Semites that say Christ killers are going to kill all Jews. And then you still have Jews that are going to stay blind even when the Messiah comes. You know, they're not, because in Jesus' time, he wasn't Messiah. He proved it in every way possible. And the people in power, the priests in power, knew they were going to lose everything. They were going to lose their power, their money, their palace that they were living in. And even though they knew he was Messiah, they still said, I'm going to kill him because I don't want to lose my sweet spot. And we see that with our own government. You know, we see people doing crazy things because it's a cushy life. You know, you're power over people, and people get addicted to that. So, but this eventually is what's going to happen, and when the Messiah comes back, we'll all kind of be one again. We'll be back again. But the scripture I wanted to read on this to kind of show you where I got that from. This is Paul, and I'm trying to bore you. This is a Bible I recommend, I really like. It's a complete Jewish Bible, written by a Messianic rabbi. He was a full-fledged rabbi. Came to know Yeshua, as he would call him as his Messiah. And so he said, I better write the New Testament and put the words back in that should be there. For instance, the church, the anti-Semite church, took out the word rabbi and put in teacher. Some Bibles will actually go back and say, hey, teacher. You know, John comes up and says, hey, Lord, teacher, which means rabbi. You know, it's kind of in there in the thing. But it was rabbi, it got changed to teacher. Hanukkah got changed to Festival of Lights in our New Testament. Most people don't even know Hanukkah's mentioned there. And I think it's in Luke, but it says, here's the passage. Jesus went down to Jerusalem. It was winter, and it was time for the Festival of Lights. Now, if you read it here, it'll say Yeshua went to Yerushalayim because it was time for Hanukkah, and it was winter. And they changed Hanukkah to Festival of Lights, which is one of its names. Feast of Dedication, Festival of Lights on Hanukkah. And it's not that important of a holiday. It's not one that God had established. You will do this, you will do this. But anyway, he changed everything back to the original names. So on this, what Paul is talking about here, let me just get down here and not bore you with this. Okay, he's talking to Gentiles, and if the root is holy, so are the branches. But if some of the branches were broken off, which are you, broken off, and you, a wild olive, were grafted on. So God's talking about, or Paul's talking about, here's an olive tree, and this is Israel, and the rebellious Jews, God tore off, cut off, threw them in a pile. And that where the womb was, he would take us as Gentiles and stick them on. We're not originally in this genetic gene, so we're a wild olive branch. But the grace, God's grace, has allowed us to graft on to here. But we're getting our nutrition from Israel, our spiritual nutrition we're getting from Israel. And then Paul goes on and explains that. So if some of the branches were broken off, and you, a wild olive, were grafted among them, and have become equal shares in the riches of the olive tree. So we're equal. God sees us as equal to Jews in this tree. You get your riches from the root of the tree. Then don't boast that you are better than the branches, and that would be anti-Semitism. I'm sorry, that would be anti-Semitism. Don't boast that you are better than the branches. However, if you do boast, remember that you are not supporting the root. The root is supporting you. You will say, branches were broken off so that I could be grafted in. True, but what? But so what? They were broken off because of their lack of trust, which is a word that's used in here instead of faith. Faith sometimes, we use it so much it really means trust. Do we have faith in God, or do we trust God? It's the same meaning. However, you keep your place only because of trust. So don't be arrogant. On the contrary, be terrified. For if God did not spare the natural branches, he certainly won't spare you. So take a good look at God's kingdom and his severity as well. On one hand, severity towards those who fall off, but the other hand, God's kindness towards you, provided you maintain yourself in kindness. Otherwise, you too will be cut off. And he goes on for this. But it's talking about this vision right here of a tree. So I think it's just real important to learn the things of Judaism so we can apply them to our own book and understand it more. And this, again, is happening more and more and more. And Christians and Jews, there's so many groups now. I get mail, I'll donate some money to one, then another, and I get mail outs from all over the world, New York, Miami, Israel. I get things on my text phone, this is Rabbi such and such, thank you for donating to Christian and Jew organization. There's so many of the Israeli government is concerned about it. And mainly because of the Hasidim, the very ultra-conservative Jews. You'll see them wearing all black. They've got these long sideburns. And if they can, they'll throw rocks through your car if you're driving on Saturday, on Shabbat, Sabbath. They're pretty determined what they're doing. So anyway, so it's growing and growing. It's not going to end. It's going to continue to grow, until God has everybody He wants in this group on that. So, what time is it? Is that? Are we
10:54.
7:54. So yeah, we could go on and on and on, but that kind of gives you just a little bit of a glimpse. Oh, one more thing I wanted to tell you, which just found this out. We need these for Hanukkah to my brothers and sisters. This is something I really recommend. I'll kind of leave it out here so you can see it. It's Kathy Lee Gifford. It's called The Rock, the Road, and the Rabbi. This is Rabbi Sobel, and he is Messianic. I don't know for how long, but what I'm talking about is just dim compared to what he talks about. Because again, he's a Jew. This has been his life. This is his family. This is his genetics. He can tell you so much more than I can tell you about what we're talking about. But the first, and there's a video that goes with this. I think they're about 13, 20 minutes long. We gave this book and the video to my siblings for Hanukkah. We do have a Christmas tree. Use it for the kids. Probably with the kids out of the house now, we probably won't even bother with one. But we put Hanukkah presents under the Christmas tree. They were like, oh, this is crazy, And we'd have our 8 days of Hanukkah. My kids insist on it because you get 8 presents. And every day they come home and say, it's the 8th day, or it's the first day of Hanukkah. Let's read the blessings and let's open these gifts. So everybody has to hand everybody a gift for 8 days. It's a lot of fun. It is mentioned in the Bible. you know, so it's one of the few things that we do that's mentioned in the Bible. But this is a great, great study. The first thing he went to, him and Kathy were, this is filmed, great production. Someone spent a lot of money on the production on this video. They were in Bethlehem. And in Bethlehem, they were standing in a cave in a particular field. Now, in Bethlehem, in the time of Jesus, there was a shepherds. They were called Levitical shepherds, and they were only there to raise certain lambs, and those were the lambs that had to be used in the temple. So no other lambs, when all the people would come up for their sacrificial lambs every Passover, they would have to buy them only from this farm and from these Levitical shepherds. Shepherds were very lowly. That was the lowest profession you could have. But these were Levitical shepherds watching over these special lambs. So this is a prayer shawl, and this is actually a Messianic prayer shawl. A Jewish prayer wouldn't wear this because it has a lot of Christian things on it. The prayer shawls and the outfits of the priest, after a while they'd get soiled, they'd get ruined, they would get old, they'd get tattered, they'd get ripped, and so they couldn't just throw them away because they were the holy garments. So they would take them, they would wrap them up, and they would get them to a Levitical shepherd and say, here, take these back to Bethlehem, you know what to do with them. He goes, yeah. They take them back, and they cut them into strips like bandages. And then when these babies are born, these lambs are born, they're right there with the lamb. They usually wash it off, and then they put salt on the lamb, and then they wrap them in these bandages made out of the priestly garments. They wrap them, and they're like football players. And it's like, what are they doing that for? And I wish I had time to look up the name. There's a name for that bandage. It's like halal or something like that. But anyway, they would wrap those around so that the lambs could not get ripped by the thorns or by the cave. Now, if they went along the cave and they tore and got a little blood, they're now blemished and they're no good for the sacrifice. They have to be perfect. They can't have any blemish. So that wrap these things up. Well, when Jesus was born, if you remember, there were shepherds out in the field. From that we know it wasn't wintertime because you'd freeze to death out there. It was fall. And he came and said, Christ is born, the Messiah is here, the King of Kings is here. And they said, after they got them being terrified, they said, well, how can we find him? Because there's a lot of babies being born in Bethlehem right now, in Jerusalem. How do we find him? So you'll recognize him easily. He'll have swaddling clothes, and he'll be in a trough, manger, which is a feeding trough. And they'll go, well, that's odd. Why would he have on? It wasn't swaddling clothes. That was a misinterpretation. It was this stuff. It was the lamb bandages. It says he'll be wrapped in lamb bandages. It's like, wow, well, that may be useful. I mean, what baby's going to be wrapped up in lamb bandages, and why is he wrapped up in lamb bandages? But he was born, and he was protected like the lambs are, because he was a sacrificial lamb. So he was literally wrapped up just like the baby lambs were. Never saw it before. I've been saying this for a long time. And it goes back to the Hebrew word, and he'll go back and go, yeah, your Christian version is way off here. It's not swaddling clothes. It is halal or something, and that means Levitical wraps around these lambs to keep them from being blemished. It's like padding. They're called lamb bandages. So that's why that was a clue. When we think of it as Christians, it's like a baby in swaddling clothes. Well, baby, wrapped up in swaddling clothes or diapers. How's that a clue? But now we know why they said that. And the shepherds go, oh, that's going to be easy to find. So anyway, that's my last comment on that. So, anybody have any questions?
Do Christians get persecuted in Israel?
No, they love Americans. They love Christians. In fact, when I'm going to Israel. The tour I'm going to do, the first tour was a Messianic tour. There's different tours if you look in travel guides. Do you want to do a Catholic tour? That's where you want all the shrines. You're doing the road where you bless yourself and do all these things. Do you want to do a Protestant thing where you're going to be baptized in the Jordan River and all that? Or do you want to do a Messianic? Or do you want to do Jewish? So if you're a Jew, you're going to want to do a Jewish tour. And you're not going to bother with the Christian things. Messianic is the best. And but they love tourism. They love Americans.
So it's starting like a church there and everything, they're okay with all that?
Yeah, there's churches. In fact, in Jerusalem, the old city, there's the Jewish quarter, Christian quarter, and then there's the Arab quarter. And they're all living right there next to each other. And of course, Catholicism and Greek Orthodoxy have been there for thousands and thousands of years. 2,000 years. And so they welcome that. Yeah. Now they don't want you, when you go to Israel, we're going with El Al Airlines, they're the safest in the world. They flew there. That's the Israeli airline, and they have marshals, several marshals on all planes. Some are women, some are teenagers, some are old men, but they're in disguise. You never know who they are. But they're loaded. They're ready to take you out if the terrorists attack. But they're very, very safe. They ask you lots of questions. You know, they'll screen you and everything. But Israelis are famous for screening and finding people that shouldn't be on that plane. And they usually 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 people will ask you the same question and go right in your face. So why are you coming to Israel? What you here for? You don't want to say missionary. I want to go proselyte to your people. You're not going. So they don't want you to go there to turn, and of course I don't want them to turn a Jewish person into a Christian that is going and just doing Christian stuff and forgets all his Judaism, his Jewish background. That's not what God wants. So, but they love tourism. They love our money. They love Americans, the Jewish people. Everywhere you go, you'll see these teenagers with machine guns and fatigues on. They're in the Army. Everybody has to serve in the Army, men and women. Yeah, 2 years in the Army. So they're all over the place, and they're really nice, because you'll be sitting in a cafe, and these 2 guys, a girl and a guy come out, hey, can we sit with you? Yeah, sure. You say you're from America? I said, yeah. Do you like Israel? So they're always worried about that. Do you like Israel? I said, love Israel. They go, oh, that's great. And we'll eat some. You guys serve in the Army? Yeah, I got to do work 2 years. And one interesting thing, the first time I went, I was in Metula, which is the most northern part. It sticks kind of up. It's like a little thumb that sticks up inside Lebanon. And it's right outside Mount Hermon, which, by the way, is Israel's ski resort, snow ski resort. They're skiing right now in Israel. And the mountain is owned a third by Syria. And you can literally get up on the mountain and see things in Damascus. That's how close it is. And then Lebanon owns this part, and Israel owns a third. But it was Metula. It's not a tourist destination. And it's the highest you can get. And when I look out my window of the hotel, I could see this big fence. It's about as high as this, maybe a little higher, barbed wire on the top. It was a chain link fence. And then there was a gate, and all these army trucks were in it. When I was there, Israel moved into Lebanon because they'd gone through 10 years of the PLO lobbing bombs and rockets into the northern fields. This is all their farming area up here. And so for 10 years they complained, the Israelis complained to the UN. You got to stop them. We're going to go get them. We don't hear you. We don't hear you. Got to stop them next year. They're killing our kids. They're going to bomb us. Come on. You got to let's do something. Or you go to. But you take care of it. We'll stay out of it. You get Arafat out of there. I don't hear you. I don't hear you. So they said we're going in. And so they opened the gate, went in. Of course, trapped him very, very quickly. There's one famous picture in Life magazine. We have Arafat. You doesn't know he's being watched. And there's a crosshair right in his forehead, and it's through a sniper of an Israeli. They let him go because the Americans said just let him get on a boat and sail on out of there, and he won't be back. But that was going on at the time. So I looked down, and I noticed that there was all these Lebanese kids coming. Every time tanks came through and jeeps came through, the kids would hold their hands out and they'd throw them candy bars, little snacks, potato chips, whatever they had for snacks, and they would thank you, water bottles, things like that. And then found out from the people there that it's called the Good Fence. It was named that by the Lebanese, not by the Israelis. They said this is the good gate or the good fence because we get treats and they're really nice to us. We love the Israelis, and we're getting this nasty guy out of our capital because he turned what used to be the Riviera of the Mediterranean into a hellhole. Everything was, his people were just horrible. But anyway, we're down for breakfast the next day, and here's these Israeli army men and women there, eating breakfast, and CNN's playing. And I said, oh, CNN, you get that? Yeah, we'll get to sit in from America, see what's going on in America. Last night, in the town of Metula, in North Israel, there was fierce fighting. There was a fierce gun battle. I go, what? And they said the Israelis have killed 3 women, 5 children, and some Palestinians. And I look at him, and they just keep eating. I go, there was no fight last night. I was here. He goes, no, there was no fight. He says, did you guys go out on any kind of patrol? Were you shooting? No, we weren't shooting here in Metula. I said, I know I slept all night. I would have woke up. I said, how can they say that? It's a complete lie. He says they do it all the time. Let's see, that's the news, the American news. They lie all the time. And because they're getting their numbers from the Palestinians or Hamas, Hamas will say, 16 of them got killed. And they said, well, these were women and children and innocent people that got killed. That's what they turn into the Red Cross. So that's when I stopped, or I started to reevaluate what I see on TV. Because at that point, I love CNN. We were always trying to do Atlanta, Ted Turner, kind of get this whole thing going. It's like, wow, this is so cool. Cable, we don't have to put up an antenna anymore. It was like it was such a brand new sense. And then, of course, what they've come today. So But that's a good question. No, they don't want you proselytizing, but there's churches all over. And church groups go there, probably every month of the year. So that was a good question. Anything else?
You said the Passover is a meal that you think Christians should do. Is there another holiday in there or a festival?
Yeah, there is the Feast of Tabernacles. Does anybody know what that is? Feast of Tabernacles. It's the one that God in the Bible actually says Gentiles have to come to this. Now, he doesn't say that Gentiles have to come to Passover, but God says, and it really talks about in that day, in the end time, when Jesus is running this, there has to be Gentiles from every nation represented, or I will curse them. So, to me, we like to do the tabernacle. Tabernacles is, I think it's also 8 days. Probably when Jesus was born. We kind of get that from because everything lines up. He was conceived at Hanukkah. He was born at the Feast of Tabernacles, and then he died at Passover. These were already well established, but that's kind of how God works. There's no chance. Einstein, the great genius, his famous saying was, God does not play dice with the universe, because all these other physicists come up going, things are too random. I mean, this new theory of chaos, this is the greatest thing. It trumps your idea of physics. He goes, I just don't see God playing dice with the universe. He's too precise, on that. But anyway, yeah, the Passover, I just get so much out of it, and every time I do it with a Christian group, last year we did it down on Highway 77, there was about 70 people there, and they all just said, I've never heard this before, and this is so wonderful, we should all be doing this, just to honor what Jesus did, on that Last Supper, because if it was important to him, and the fact that he took this and established this middle piece, this 3-in-1 matzah, and said, this is my body, take this, we're his servants, so, and we honor him, he's our Lord, so I just think it's important to do that. And, when we get to heaven, there's going to be a lot of things explained that I don't know, you don't know, and say, wow, well, why didn't I pick up on that on earth, So, but I think it's great to learn, because to me, the revelation of the Bible, it just keeps popping and popping, things you just never heard of before. Again, Jews that become Messianic, they connect the dots like this, and this, and they can teach a Sunday school class in 1 week. And they're not converting to Christianity; they're being completed in their Judaism.
So are you self-taught or are you under somebody? Is there Jew?
There has been in the past. I took a 2.5-year college course and have a bachelor's degree in Messianic studies. So I did that. That was way back when I was early 20s, and that's actually when I went to Israel. The last part of that class was the final, which we go to Israel, and then we could see everything we've been studying about for 2 years. Go to a battlefield. There's a museum down there, and there's just rolling hills. It's just rocky, no trees, and you see these Jewish kids running up, and they're talking in Hebrew, and ask the guy, what are they talking about? I said, oh, they're talking about, we were up here, our troops were here, the other troops were down there, the enemy was down in the valley. We came all the way around, surrounded, we came down with a loud noise and completely destroyed them. It was a great wind, really good wind. I said, well, is this something recent? He says, no, it's in the Old Testament, it's the Philistines and David. And it's our history. See, our Old Testament is Israel's American history. It's Israeli history. So they go and they look to see where these battles took place, just like we go to the Civil War battlefield and things like that. So that's a good question. He's about ready to go to sleep. He's tired, isn't he?